Hey, David Bello here, and I'm just going to say it. The Kerr County leadership failed not just the county, they failed the entire state, even the nation. Many of the lives that were lost in the horrible flash flooding could have been prevented had the Kerr County leadership done what they needed to do to protect the people from a known threat. Okay? I'm not blaming Kerr County officials for the flood. It was a horrific flash flood. No one could have predicted it. But what they could have done is they could have put an early alert warning system, siren system, kind of like what cities have for tornadoes or tsunamis. They could have done it, and they should have done it. But they chose not to, okay? They chose not to. It wasn't even about whether or not they had the money. They had the money. They chose to spend the money elsewhere, all right? It's not a matter of if they had it or being fiscally conservative. They chose to spend the money, quite frankly, on animals. Animals were more important to Kerr County officials than warning the innocent lives of a flash flood. Animals. Why do I say that? Okay? Why do I say that? Because Kerr County, they say, well, it would have been $1 million to build this, alert system, this siren system, that would alert people if the water started rising. $1 million. Well, you know what? We can see where they spend their money, right? We can pull up the Kerr County budget, and we can see that they spend over $1 million a year on animal services, okay? Animal services. That was more important to them. In fact, they put a bond to the people to build a $5 million animal facility. All right? They didn't want $1 million siren system in an area that they knew is Flash Flood Alley. They knew just 10 years ago, about a decade ago, there was a horrific flash flood. They knew in the 80s there was a horrific flash flood in this same river. All right? It's not some random, we're not saying every city should build a siren, $1 million siren system beside their creek. But we know that this creek is Flash Flood Alley. This river. We know it happens. It's just like if you were to put you don't need a tsunami siren in every city in America, just along the beaches that might have a tsunami. They knew they had flash floods, horrific ones. They talked about it for decades. Well, maybe we should build a siren system. Oh no, $50,000 for a study, that's too much. Let's take this 10 million COVID money we got and let's give everybody at the sheriff's office raises. All right? Let's not spend it on something that's necessary to protect people's lives. Let's just give ourselves raises. Let's just build a $5 million animal facility. Let's spend $1 million a year on animal services. I mean, what does society come to? Choosing animals over human lives. It's a theme that's all over America. People would say they'd rather humans die than animals. It's crazy. Animals walking down, the road, and they get hit by a car, and they're like, I wish the human would have got killed, not the poor animal. People are demented in America where they think animals are more important than humans, and they put their money to animals instead of humans. You probably have people saying, yeah, I believe in abortion, but then they'd have a rally for PETA about an animal being euthanized after it attacked a kid, And I'm not saying, hate animals. I love animals, What I'm saying is our priority should be humans animals. So if money needs to be spent somewhere, and you're like, well, hey, we got this overpopulation of animals, we got some aggressive animals, instead of saying, oh, I've got a bleeding heart, I'm just going to spend a $5 million facility, build a $5 million facility to house these animals, until they get adopted out. Why don't we say, let's build a $1 million siren system to save the lives of those girls at that mystic camp? Let's do that. And then let's maybe just euthanize some of these animals, because humans are more important than animals. And yes, it's okay if you have an overpopulation of animals, or you have, animals that are aggressive. You don't need to spend all this taxpayer money to rehabilitate the animals or wait years until they find, another home. Euthanize them so you can not have to euthanize the humans, so you can save the humans. All right? So it's not a matter of Kerr County not having money to build a siren system. They had the money. They chose to spend it somewhere else. Okay? They knew they had an issue of drastic flash floods that would kill people in their county. All right? They knew that something needed to be done about it. All right? Other counties were doing it. I'm not saying Kerr County officials are evil or wanted to kill anybody. All right? I'm sure they're great, nice people. They had no ill intention of denying spending money on these sirens, okay? They just chose to spend it somewhere else. And it was a wrong decision. And even if they didn't mean to make the wrong decision, it was the wrong decision, and hundreds of lives are dead or missing because of it. So you know what? Governor Abbott's right. In the middle of the flood, you don't point fingers. You get to work and try to save people and try to get through the game. All right? Point fingers isn't going to do anything. But guess what? After the game's over, after the season's over, the head coach that's got a losing record gets fired. All right? And so that's what I'm saying Kerr County needs to do. They need to fire their leadership of the county. Probably the judge, probably emergency management, maybe even the sheriff who's over emergency management. All right? When this is all said and done, the people shouldn't even have to fire them. They should resign. They didn't heed the warnings. They hit the freaking iceberg with the Titanic and people died. They need to own up that they were in leadership when they made these decisions that led to more people dying that needed to be that might not have all died had they had an early warning system like they should have done and knew they should have done. All right? So we need some resignations. I'm not in Kerr County, all right? But people in my area, a kid at my own child's school in Beaumont, Texas, hundreds of miles from Mystic Camp. A little girl died from his school. So guess what? I'm going to speak about it even if I don't live in Kerr County, because it affected not only Texas, it affected America. And the leadership of Kerr County needs to step up, own up that they made the wrong decision and they put money in other places instead of protecting the people. All right, they put money towards animals. More money than what it would have cost for an early warning siren system to save lives on that river. All right, they made the wrong decision. They need to own up to it and they need to resign. They need to move on. All right, I don't hate you. You didn't intentionally try to have all these people killed. You can't control the flood, but you could control whether or not you decided to put an early warning system in when you knew one was needed. And you might be a nice person. You didn't do this intentionally, but it was the wrong decision, and you need to resign. All right? Because in America, counties everywhere, cities everywhere, they need to get back to protecting humans. we don't want wasteful spending, but we want spending that is necessary to protect our society, our people. All right? $5 million to build an animal shelter because people cried about too many dogs being euthanized. $1 million a year budget to, coddle these animals and, help them get adopted instead of just giving the money to help maybe homeless veterans, maybe, single, mothers or fathers that are struggling to raise their kids that lost their job, maybe $1 million early warning system to protect hundreds of people from a flood. All right. Maybe spend that money there instead of so much towards animals or any other wasteful spending. But you see it in America everywhere now. There's this crazy idea that animals are more important than humans. And I'm not saying go hate animals. I'm not saying go kill animals. But sometimes it's okay to euthanize animals instead of spending $1 million that could have gone towards an early warning system. All right? We need to look at our priorities in America. Human lives are more important than animals. All right? So we need to prioritize Americans. We need to prioritize human life. Okay? Same goes everywhere. We shouldn't be sending all this money to other places. When Americans are suffering here in America. We need to help Americans, and then whatever money's left over, then we can do, what we can for animals or other countries, whatever. Bottom line, the Kerr County leadership decided to spend money elsewhere instead of spending it on an early warning alert system, siren system that would have saved hundreds of lives. And they need to own up to it, and they need to resign. All right? And we need to prioritize everywhere, focusing on not wasteful spending. We don't want that, but it's not wasteful if it's a necessary thing to protect the citizens from a likely peril, a peril that might come at any day because you're in flash flood alley. All right, that's a reasonable, necessary expenditure instead of, all the other wasteful spending that they decided to do. All right, so I'm a little upset, okay? This whole thing upsets me. And you're right. A lot of y'all, like Governor Abbott, right when it's happening, you don't point fingers. You just dig in and you try to save as many lives as you can. But now that it's unfortunate, there's probably no more survivors. Now that it's over and recovery has begun, well, now it's time for this leadership to step up and resign or or be fired, all right? But leaders need to step up and own what happens under them, the failures that happened under them. And when hundreds of lives are lost, that's a massive failure. And you need to own up. You need to resign. And not only in Kerr County, but all over Texas and America, we need to focus on human lives. Money towards necessary expenditures towards saving human lives. All right, that is an okay expenditure. It's not wasteful. What's wasteful is spending it on animal services versus saving human lives with an early warning system. It's all about decisions. It's all about making the decisions necessary. Making the right decisions necessary. And if you don't make those decisions, you shouldn't be in office anymore. So that's my 2 cents about it. I'm very upset because a lot of innocent lives died. And it was unnecessary. You can't control the flood. No, look, they were blaming Trump, saying, his cuts to the National Weather Service did this. No, they didn't. National Weather Service put out their alerts. All right, they put out proper alerts well in advance. All right. The local authorities were sleeping on the job or didn't take it seriously enough. So, National Weather Service didn't do wrong. They did what they could with the information to predict the flood, and they did. but there wasn't a warning system in place that the county knew needed to be done, that they decided not to spend money on, and instead spent the money elsewhere. So people need to resign in the Kerr County leadership. And hopefully this is a wake-up call to America, that in Texas, that if you make the wrong decision, if you don't value lives over animals, for instance, you should not be in leadership, all right? We need leaders that value lives and spend money wisely to protect lives. That's one of the purposes of government, not to have this, all this wasteful spending, for instance, trying to take years to adopt pets, that bit somebody and then you try to rehabilitate them instead of just euthanizing them. Take that money from that and spend it on, let's actually protect our citizens, all right, from crime, from flash floods, from enemy countries, with a good military. Spend money on what's going to protect the citizens so that the citizens can live and have life and flourish. And then the citizens can spend the money on the animal shelters to save the dog that bit a kid that somebody wants to rehabilitate, Citizens can spend their money because they're alive and living and not dead in a flood. And they can spend their money on whatever pet projects they want. But the government made the wrong decision here in Kerr County. They put other things ahead of the lives of their people and other people around the state and the United States that died in that flood. They knew there was an issue. They neglected their duty to protect the citizens with an early warning system that other counties had done, that they knew needed to be done. And now they need to resign. And hopefully others in America will wake up and make their decisions to protect lives. That should be the number one thing in mind when you're making decisions as a leader, as a politician, is we need to save lives first. Protect and save lives. Anything other than that is not as important as first spending money on protecting and saving lives. And then if you got extra money, if the citizens want you to do something with extra money, go ahead. Go for it, whatever. But you don't spend money on these port projects that aren't necessary to saving lives until you've spent the money to save the lives and to protect the citizens. So it had to be said. All right, I know somebody's probably going to get mad at me. Oh, you can't point fingers. Yes, I can. Yes, I can. We have a record of the county leadership talking about it, knowing it needs to be done, and then not doing it because they said it was too expensive, and yet they spent that same amount of money on other things that weren't as important. So yes, the leadership needs to be held accountable. They need to resign, and hopefully this is a wake-up call so this never happens again. Leadership, if you know there's a safety issue that might kill hundreds or thousands of people in your area, spend that money first to protect the people before you do your other little projects, okay? Hundreds of lives died. You can't control the flash flood, but you could have controlled an early warning system. And I pray for all the families out there that lost lives. It's affected everybody, even me over here 100 miles away in southeast Texas. People down here died over there in Kerr County for the weekend. So God bless everyone out there helping, all the law enforcement, all the random people, that are out there helping search, helping recover, and helping save people's lives over there. And hopefully we move from this and learn as a society that people are more important. Lives of people are more important than some of these pet projects in the budget. And you know what? Also, we need to learn that if you make a mistake as a leader, maybe you need to resign, because sometimes the blood is on your hands if you took an action to deprive the people of something that you knew was needed and you didn't do. and the people died.